welcome to the Motorsport Review. I am your host, Perry Brown, back after a very short break away. I was in Barcelona with family, but now I'm back, and I'm delighted to say that here to wrap up the two races that I missed with me, as well as reviewing the first half of the Formula One season, is the brilliant Tom Cairns. Tom, how are you doing tonight?
Not too bad, thank you, Perry, and hello to everyone. 14 rounds down, 10 to go in this 2025 season. A change of the guard at the head of the field compared to what we saw last year. That is McLaren. The constructors may be a bit of a given. I say a bit of a given. It's almost a given that McLaren are going to be achieving it. The question is, which one of their two drivers is going to be crowned champion for the first time?
It's unrelenting, isn't it? They are not. No driver is getting ahead of the other. It's going to go to the wire. I cannot wait. We'll get into the second half of the season as it comes. But Tom, I want to talk about you just a little bit here, because you have just wrapped on your first season of Tom Cairns Catches Up. Well done. Congratulations on that. You had some absolutely fantastic guests on there. How's the feedback been, and what plans have you got for season 2?
I'm glad I've had the experience of speaking to each and every one of them, particularly the likes of Alex Jakes, Ben Edwards, Nicky Shields, Alex Brundle. It's been brilliant, and I'm absolutely happy that they've taken the time to speak to me about their careers and that really, and understand what it is they do now, and understanding the challenges they've had to face throughout their careers. And then it's just about building up for season 2. I mean, I haven't worked too much on series 2 yet. There are guests which I want to be getting on. I won't disclose too much, but I think when October comes around and prepping for the second series, that's when I'm going to start inviting guests on, and hopefully we can get series 2 up and running. We're aiming for the first Wednesday of January 2026. So it'll be an earlier start than what it had been this year.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. I'm available, if you haven't got the caliber of guests and you get to the bottom of the barrel, I'm here. But no, you had some fantastic guests. Some people I hadn't really thought of in the names I might have heard of, like Alex Goldstein. I hadn't really heard of him, and then listened to it. It's just a brilliant way to introduce to some names that you might not have known and recognized. And you almost got some scoops with Nicky Shields almost revealed, talking to you, that she was joining Formula One. But no, it's top stuff. So let's get into Belgium and Hungary. And I took some inspiration from yourself for this. So after every race, if you don't follow Tom on social media, please do. He does a brilliant little segment, like a couple of minutes, wraps up the weekend nicely, 5 things that we learned. So I've literally watched both of those reviews, because I only saw highlights of those races, unfortunately, and combined it into a top 5 things that we learned from Belgium and Hungary. So number 1, we're going with the McLaren battles. That was top on each one, of course. Lando Norris winning in Hungary and Oscar Piastri taking the win in Belgium. As we said, there's nothing to choose between them. It's punch and counter punch. It's going to go to the wire. What did you think of those two races? I mean, it was the one that qualified ahead ended up worse off in the race. I just love this battle. I love this fight.
It feels like a little bit of Senna and Prost, just not as ferocious. Not yet, anyway, between the pair of them. But it was a good weekend in Belgium for Oscar Piastri. After missing out on that sprint win at the expense of Max Verstappen, he was able to overcome that in the wet conditions at the beginning of the Grand Prix on the Sunday. And he was pretty much unchallenged since. I know Lando tried something different with the strategy, where he went on the hard tyres compared to Piastri, who went on the mediums when the track was dry enough for slicks. And Piastri wasn't really challenged that much. I know Norris closed down on him. He made a mistake at Paul corner, and then he made another one in the final couple of laps at La Source, and that was pretty much that. So you can't say that Piastri didn't deserve to win at Spa, because he did. He was the outright winner, I thought, and he deserved to extend his lead at the top of the championship. Then we get to Hungary the following weekend, and it was a weekend where I thought Lando definitely needed to win this one, and he duly delivered on the track, where he felt like he was robbed of a win last year when he was ordered by his team to let Piastri through, purely on the nature of how that race went in 2024. But in 2025, Lando didn't put a foot wrong whatsoever. He had to play a different game, though, to Piastri with the strategy again, except the fact that he went on a 1 stop, whereas Piastri did the 2. I honestly thought Piastri was going to get by Norris in the closing stages, because after he got by Leclerc with 20 laps to go, he had a 9-second gap to make up. On the freshest set of rubber, I think it was gaining at least half a second a lap on him, and at that rate, he'd be within striking range to overtake him to get the victory. He didn't that time, and it very nearly ended in tears on the penultimate lap when the pair had almost collided, when Piastri attempted to get by him, locked up, and luckily missed him. Had they collided, it'd have been a lot more of an intense debrief over at McLaren post-race. Lando won the race, Oscar second, and down to 9 points it goes into the summer break. And I think we are going to be in for a blockbuster of a run-in to this 2025 season.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll come back to the strategy in a moment, because I think it's very telling that the 2 Hungarian Grand Prix that we've had, like this year and last year, have ended with, you know, a bit of a debate. Are they favouring one driver, over the other? The answer to that is they're not, of course. But strategically, are McLaren playing the right games and playing it the right way? So we'll come back to that in a second. But for number 2, these were the first 2 races we've had ever with Red Bull without Christian Horner as well. As you mentioned, Verstappen got off to a brilliant start with the sprint race win. And I think possibly some people thought, is this a second coming of Red Bull? Could they be coming back? It was proven too early and they were nowhere back in the race. And then Hungary got even worse. So a bit of struggle for them, and outscored by, I got this from your videos as well, outscored by Sauber over the last 4 race weekends now. That's incredible. I mean, A, Sauber are doing really well, but B, Red Bull Racing not scoring as many points as Sauber.
Well, it's dire. They're in dire straits of Red Bull right now. And I said this to someone, that the next 6 months before the Red Bull Ford powertrain project kicks in, it's a restructuring process at Red Bull within the personnel side of things. You know, Laurent Mekies is assigned or promoted, as some people would say, from being Racing Bull's team principal to being Red Bull's team principal and CEO. How much is he going to have an impact on the team? I think he'll have a positive impact, but it's not going to be straight off the bat. It's going to take time before that Red Bull team comes together. I mean, you mentioned about Verstappen taking that sprint win. I mean, Tsunoda didn't have too bad of a weekend in the sprint, or in terms of qualifying pace anyway, but he just couldn't get it right in the sprint or in the Grand Prix. And Tsunoda's lack of consistency at the moment, I feel for the man, because we all know that Tsunoda is better than this.
Definitely.
But it's difficult to comprehend, because it completely disguises the talent that Tsunoda has, and the fact that that car has not been set up for him the way it needs to have done. It feels to me like they've set that car up in the same way as they have done for Verstappen, and they expect Tsunoda to acclimatise to it. And clearly he hasn't been able to acclimatise to it very well. Lawson couldn't get it right at the beginning of the year, but he was never given enough time anyway. And Perez, well, perhaps rewind last year, we all thought Perez was going to be given the boot in favour of Tsunoda. Now it feels like the fact that Tsunoda is performing the way he has been, and the fact that we saw Lawson perform the way he did when he was at Red Bull, makes Perez look elite. Yeah,
we probably should have put more respect on his name to Perez. I think is what they would be saying. But yes, that plight of the second car goes on. And there was an interesting story, and I don't know how much truth there was to it, that Laurent Mekies came in and said, hang on, we've got some parts we're stockpiling for Verstappen, and I know if he damages a front wing and you've got to change like for like, you kind of want the same one, like a spare, to go on, or you're going to suffer for it, you're going to get a penalty. But when he said, no, let's put these on Tsunoda's car, you kind of thought, hang on, maybe there's some truth to this rumor that, you know, they're a one car outfit, when I've been saying all along, like, no, maybe Verstappen's just better at getting the most out of something, you know, that isn't a 23 out of 24 race winning car that it was just 2 years ago. On to number 3. As I say, we're going through these because we're going to cover each team anyway, so I don't want to get too much bogged down into them. But number 3, even more mixed results for Ferrari. So whether you look across the 2 cars, you know, Hamilton 7th and 12th across the 2 races, Leclerc 3rd and 4th. You know, if you look at Leclerc, you're thinking they're pretty happy with that, even though he was down in the dumps after the Hungarian Grand Prix. But Hamilton, very critical of himself in Budapest. I definitely want to talk about that. I have not seen this Hamilton since 2011.
You're quite right. And Hamilton is going through a difficult period of his own with the way the car is set up. Mind you, next year's car is going to be radically different with the new regulations put in place. So if I was Hamilton, I wouldn't exactly beat himself up over it. But he clearly is having a difficult time of it. Is he having trouble with his relationship with his new race engineer, Riccardo Adami? Is he having struggles with certain people within the team? Is it certain politics within the sport he's not happy with? I don't know, but there's something not quite right in Lewis Hamilton's mind right now, and that's got to be sorted by the time Formula One returns in Zandvoort. I'm not expecting Lewis to get anything out of this year. I mean, the fact he hasn't got a podium yet for Ferrari after 14 races tells you everything you need to know, because he won that sprint from pole in China, and people thought Hamilton's arrived at Ferrari. Well, clearly he hasn't, because he hasn't been able to sustain the form, and Ferrari haven't been able to develop the car enough to fight it out with McLaren more often. The closest they've been is probably Monaco, where Leclerc got that second place finish when he came so close to getting that pole position. Had he got pole, I think he would have converted that into the win, in my point of view. For Lewis, well, it feels like a consolidation year for him in a similar way to what it was when he first arrived at Mercedes in 2013.
Yes, I'm the same as you. Give him a year and just, let him sit this one out. Like, not sit this one out, but develop this year. This isn't his car. Sainz, Leclerc have been developing this car over the last 2-3 years. So absolutely, they need to let him have a say in next year's car, as you say, radically different. So yeah, I think he'll go away. He'll refresh. He'll launch his new Amave drink. He's not retiring. For anyone that thought 808 was, or that date was him perhaps retiring, a long way off. It's just a new flavor of drink that he's released. So maybe a little bit of a refresh, doing something else that he enjoys, and then coming back to Formula One, we'll get to see the best of Hamilton again in Zandvoort. So we'll come back to them. The final, number 4. See, I'm not very good at this. You're the professional at being able to count to 5. Number 4, I've got Aston Martin, because they were the only team not to take. Again, I've just listened to your videos and just rehashed it. Aston Martin, the only team not to take any points from Belgium. Suddenly they turn up in Hungary and they just look an entirely different outfit from the one that left pointless from Belgium. So, I mean, are we just going to say this is to do with their extreme strengths and weaknesses affecting those tracks, or is it just that Formula One is that close and you can, a couple of attempts and you can suddenly go from 0 to hero?
Do you know what I think has contributed to the performance of that Aston Martin? The C5 compound. They brought that tyre to Imola, which was the medium, and they thrived on that tyre during qualifying, did Aston Martin. You could say the same during, I can't remember if it was Monaco. It might have been Monaco, because they brought the softest compounds over to Monaco, the C4, C5, and C6. But whenever the Pirelli bring the C5 compound, Aston Martin tends to absolutely give it all, and it's reflected on the qualifying performances. They weren't going to use the C5s in the race anyway, because the C5 is not a race tyre for Hungary, I don't think, although they could have used that if they wanted to. I mean, a few of the drivers did, like Nico Hülkenberg, for instance. But it was just a stronger weekend. It was a much stronger weekend for Aston Martin. I think they were quite perplexed and a little bit tricked out a little bit by the conditions at Spa, because they couldn't decide what setup to go for. Because once you leave the garage for qualifying, you are locked in with the setup for the race itself. Even if it rains, you are only allowed to change minor parts of the car. The major parts of it, you have to leave under part ferme until after the race is over. But they're starting to come alive a little bit now, Aston Martin, after a tricky start to the season, especially Fernando Alonso, because he didn't score a point until, was it Monaco or Imola? I can't quite remember. But he went through the first quarter of the season at least. Yeah, it was the first quarter of the season where he had his worst start for a long time. I think it might have been 2015, because it took him until the British Grand Prix that year to score his first point. This year, it took him until either race 7 or 8. I think it might have been 8 in Monaco, where he finally got his first points. Or he might have been Emily, I can't quite remember. But Aston Martin are looking like a different team now, I think, compared to what they were the previous weekend. They were capable of scoring points. They were just unlucky that they couldn't get it right in quali, and they just couldn't exactly nail it in the conditions. I mean, if they gambled on the dry setup in qualifying, would that have helped them in the race? I think that remains to be, well, it remains to be unanswered until further down the line. But they're in a better position now, Aston Martin, and looking like they could possibly take the fight to some of the other teams, as well as Williams, for 5th place in the Constructors' Championship.
Yes, we'll come into that battle later on, because they are closing that gap down nicely. Yes, and it's good to see Stroll getting points for them as well. Like, there was a stat that came out the last 2 seasons that I not quite liked, but was shocked by, that basically if Stroll had stayed at home for 2024 and 2023, not took part in a race, their position in the Constructors' Championship was completely unaffected. He didn't score enough points to actually put them up or down a place. So to see him on equal points, I believe, yeah, they're both on 26 points at the moment. It's good to see that he's contributing, and that it's a 2-car team. You know, when you look at the difference between Red Bull, where you've got Verstappen on 187 and Tsunoda on 10, you can kind of go, well, you know, you need to have two guys scoring 2 guys or girls, of course, scoring points every weekend and extracting the most out of the car. So on to the final point then. I had the rookie debate as number 5. Oliver Bearman ended his points drought in the Belgian Grand Prix sprint, 7th place, so he got 2 points from that. And Bortoleto recorded his best finish to date in Hungary, as we've sort of touched on the Sauber and the rejuvenation of Sauber, a team I'd written off as finishing 10th. I thought they were just in a holding pattern until Audi took over, and suddenly here they are. They're looking like a genuine outfit, and as you say, they're on 51 points. They're just 1 point behind Aston Martin, and both are closing in on Williams. So there's a big battle between all the rookies. There's a big melee in the middle going on here. So yeah, the battle between Bearman, Bortoleto, Antonelli, Hadjar, Lawson, Doohan and Colapinto, if you want to include them in said debate as well. Rookies are doing all right at the moment, aren't they?
Well, no, certainly Bortoleto. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and this is not me lying in any shape or form. I thought at the beginning of the season that Bortoleto could be the best rookie, not in terms of points, but in regards to the performance in what the car is capable of doing. I thought he could be voted the best rookie of the year, and he could still do. And I'm really looking forward to see what more he's going to be contributing between now and the end of the year. It kind of gives me shades of Charles Leclerc a little bit, Perry, because if you remember in 2018, it took a few races before Leclerc found his feet. And then when Formula One had arrived in Baku, the 4th race of the year, you know, at a circuit where anything can happen, you never know in terms of all the incidents that could end up jeopardizing the race for some. Leclerc got it absolutely bang on there with a 6th place finish, which proved to be his best result of the year. But then we started seeing more of the Leclerc that we were waiting for, and he duly delivered. I think the difference with Bortoleto is that his future's already sorted out before he even turned a wheel in a Sauber for this year, with Audi coming around, and he's going to be basically part of a works team. So there's a bright future ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto, and I'm looking forward to see what Audi are going to be able to come up with. Mind you, they are the only team they're going to be running an Audi engine, and if it performs brilliantly, then I can imagine, you know, a team or two will be asking for a customer engine of theirs. But for Bortoleto's sake, is he going to be able to sustain that for when Audi arrive in 2026?
Yeah, he's coming at the right time, as you say. There's some people get their Formula 2 or GP2, as it was back in the day, get their Formula 2 championship win. They go knocking on all the team's doors. And the top name that comes to my head as a McLaren fan is Stoffel van Dorn, who arrived at a McLaren that was just not the right time, alongside Alonso, who's probably the worst teammate you can have when you're trying to find your feet in Formula One. Because if there's any weakness, he'll find it. And it just made Van Dorn not look very good. Bortoleto, on the other hand, has walked into a seat that I think a lot of people said, well, Bottas is at Sauber. He's sort of going to throw his hat in the ring for an Audi seat. Hulkenberg was on the list. He's obviously still there. He felt like he had one hand on one of the seats, and you had Carlos Sainz as well, I believed, was looking at those seats, and then you had other names around like Perez's, Colapinto's. So for Bortoleto to win Formula 3, Formula 2, and come in now and put in the season that he's putting in right ahead of us in 2025, he's got a real claim to having his contract like renewed very soon for 2026, and that'll be very interesting and very deserved as well. I think, as you say, I would have him as my top rookie at the moment, and I know a lot of people will just look straight at the points and go, well, it's Antonelli, but you've got to remember he's in a Mercedes. He should be getting more points than the other rookies, and as impressive as Antonelli has been, you've got to look at the others, and I as I say, I think Bortoleto is probably doing the best of them for me. Hadjar is probably the most consistent of them, but those exceptional races are belonging to Bortoleto at the moment, and Anthony's had a few flashes where he's shown his potential as well. So that wraps up those weekends. We've talked a little bit already, so want to get into our half season report, and we're going to go up the order. And I said I broke it down into battles. Well, straight away we're just going to look at 10th Alpine, because they're not really in a fight with anyone at this point. They're in a fight with themselves. Gasly's got all 20 of their points. I mean, this is like Red Bull without Verstappen for me. They're really in dire straits. Where do we think Alpine can look to the second half of this year, or even 2026? Where do you think they're looking at to maybe improve their fortunes?
Well, this is their last season with the Renault power unit before they switch to Mercedes next season for Alpine. It feels like their focus is more on that as opposed to this year. And their problems further compounded when Franco Colapinto had crashed during the Pirelli test after the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend. How are we grading this? Are we doing it on a scale of 1 to 10, or sort of A, B, C, D, E, or how do you want to grade them?
I hadn't thought about actually grading them, but yeah, let's go out of 10. I like that, out of 10.
The thing is, because we're going through team by team by team, I have to keep coming up with reasons as to why I'm giving them that rating. Yeah. I think it's going to be a 4 out of 10 for Alpine. In terms of picking up 20 points, I mean, they've done well to get that many points, despite the fact that they're bottom of the constructors, which has never happened before, where you see all 10 teams scoring 20 points after the first 14 races of the season. I mean, that's mad. But I think in terms of the car's performance compared to their rivals, I think comprehensively it's been a disappointing year for them. And it looks like it can end up being the first season since the days of either Tolman. I don't know if Tolman ever finished bottom of the constructors. They probably haven't been, because I think there's been worse teams than them. But it could be a first for Enstone, seeing their side finishing last in the constructors.
Yeah, it's tricky to watch. Their fans must be sat there going, "God, get Gasly out of there. Just sell the team. Whatever you want to do with the team, just do something with it. Grab it by the horns and actually do something with it." They've got Briatore back, whether you love or hate him. But again, you think this is a man who's won championships with this team, and they should be feeling the benefit of that. But we're not seeing anything. And as you say, they're down on power, they're down on reliability. They haven't got 2 scoring drivers. It's just a tale of woe at the moment. Hopefully that won't go on and they can improve. So the next battle up from there, I've got Haas and RB. So Haas currently 35 points, RB 45. RB maybe closer to Sauber, but on recent form are falling away from that fight. So I've got them as like not last place. But how do we assess Haas and RB?
I think Haas have been, Haas. Yeah, they've been that typical midfield team who would do well to get points on any occasion. I thought at the beginning of the year they looked strong, particularly in China, because they were awful in Australia. If you remember when Ollie Behrman crashed his car during practice and he spun off again, I think in free practice 3, and it left him with all sorts of work to do in a wet race, really. And it was just a matter of finishing, I think, for both cars. China, they got it right. I mean, I know they were aided by the disqualifications of others, with Ocon finishing 5th and Behrman 8th. I mean, Berman got his first point since Bahrain when he finished 7th in the sprint at Spa. Ocon, I think, has been solid. It's definitely going to be a higher rating than the Alpine. I'm going to give them a 5 for this one.
Okay.
I did consider 5.5, but we'll go on to other teams further down the line.
Okay, and RB, as I say, there's been points where they've looked like the best Red Bull team, and you go, they've qualified well and not quite got the finish positions that have that their performance looks like it's going to warrant. They've got lulled into a few bad strategies at points as well, but two half decent drivers now that seem more settled. As you say, Lawson had his 2-race stint at Red Bull. He's got much happier since he's been at RB. Would you put them at 5 as well, or slightly higher?
I think because of the way they've been able to sustain points finishes rather than the number of points they've been scoring, that's what I'm putting it down to. And Hadjar's been fantastic this year. And I was even speaking to Bob Constagiros on my podcast this year. He tipped Hadjar to be the best rookie out of the lot. And I can see why he said that. With Lawson, he's been able to recover after what was a difficult start to the year. And he's been on a run of form, to be fair. I mean, he had his best result of the year at Austria. He was sensational in Monaco. And he had 2 fairly good races as well in Spa and Hungary. I'm going to give Racing Bulls 5.5 out of 10.
Fair, I'd go the same. I think, yeah, looking good, looking up. But I think we're all just waiting for that next thing to come from them to deliver something. I think I grouped these two because I felt like RB and Haas have been more anonymous than some of the other teams. When they've got points, it's sort of been like a 9th and a 10th here. There's been no real stand up, shout out moments from them. They've just been consistent, but not consistently quick enough. So then Sauber, Aston Martin, and Williams grouped together because you've got Sauber and Aston Martin on 52 and 51 points respectively. So Sauber just behind Aston Martin, and both teams catching up Williams, who are in a bit of a dreadful run of form. We all sort of expected big things at the start of this year. James Vowles in his 3rd year, I think, at the helm of Williams. They got Carlos Sainz, who's a big name. They've got a great pairing. They're on 70 points, so they've got a bit of an advantage. But I think the question going into the second half is, will they maintain that over the 2 green teams?
It's a very good question. And Williams have every reason to feel worried now. I mean, they did very well to get that cushion of points at the beginning of the year, and they looked like they're going to be the 5th best team, clearly. Until the likes of Sauber, Aston Martin, when they do turn up, and maybe a few of the others. So Williams will be looking over their shoulders. Let's go with Sauber first, because I've been amazed how they've managed to recover. And I think they've scored they've equaled the same number of points this year so far compared to what they had in 2022 throughout the whole of that year. And we've still got 10 races plus 3 sprints to go this year. Sauber, for me, do I give them a 6.5 or do I give them a 7?
Oh, I'd go 6.5. Save some room for the other teams.
Yeah, okay. I'll be sensible then and go 6.5 for Sauber.
I think that's fair. I think that's where I'd go with them as well. Yeah, so Aston Martin, again, I thought they were very anonymous start of the year, with Alonso, as you've said, not picking up the points for them. But they're starting to come into their own at times now, and they've got Adrian Newey, so everyone's expecting at some point this car to be transformed. We know that his push will be on 2026, but there's still the Aston Martin fans, I think, clinging on and going, no, he will be looking at the 2025 car, and at some point he's just going to bring out a new side pod and it's going to give them half a second a lap. That won't happen, but there's that hope, isn't there? There's always that Adrian Newey hope that he can just see aerodynamics, he can see lap time on a car design. So they'll be hoping that they can catch up that 18-point deficit. Where do we see that? I'm pushed between 6.5 and 7. Whether you really put them above Sauber, I'd go 6.5 for this. But do you agree with that?
I'm going to go 6. I think Sauber have merited being where they are compared to where Aston Martin have ended up. Because the big haul of points they got in Hungary, I think they were 9th in the constructors before going to Hungary. And if you had asked me, had they not got those points in Hungary, if you had asked me what would my rating be for them, it certainly wouldn't have been any more than 5.5 out of 10. So Aston Martin are getting a 6 out of 10.
Okay, fair. I'll go with that. Yeah, from where you sort of expect them to be. Yeah, that's a very good point. And then Williams, let's say they're 5th. And I think pre-season, I predicted they'd be 5th. So you'd be going, well, they're doing exactly as would be expected. They got some really good early results in the bag. And then lately there's been a few other issues creeping in. Maybe Sainz and Albon have been unhappy with a few things, a few reliability gremlins as well creeping in. But 70 points for them. I'm just looking where they are. So Albon's got 54 of those 70 points, which is quite significant. Really, Sainz, again, it's not his car. He's not developed it. So maybe we should give him the same leeway that we give Hamilton at Ferrari. He's driving someone else's car, in effect, someone else's development. So Williams was 70 points. Did we think? I thought they'd be a bit closer to the 4 teams ahead of them.
I could agree with that, but their eggs in the basket are going to be more on 2026, because one of the teams this year that are using Mercedes power units, they are Aston Martin, are switching to Honda. So that could help Williams in a way where Mercedes could help produce a better customer engine for Williams. But in terms of what I think with Williams, it feels like Sauber, except the opposite in terms of the way the tables have been turned, because they were consistent at the beginning of the year with Williams, but have dropped away quite since then. They're falling closer to where Sauber were at the beginning of the year, and that's changed massively. 6.5 out of 10 would be my rating. If they sustained the form that they had at the beginning of the year through to the mid part of this year, it would have been a 7, but it's a 6.5 from me.
Yeah, I'd go that. I might that first half of the first quarter of this season might have even gone 7.5. There was some really impressive moments from them, but they were short-lived, unfortunately. So we come to Red Bull, and I think the best thing that could be said about them is that Max Verstappen will drive for them next year. At this point, I mean, if he'd announced in the summer that he was going to Mercedes, like some people, myself, possibly believed, I mean, it would be catastrophic. But Max will drive for them next year, whatever they manage to put together. Again, new regulation sets. There's a lot of very smart people still working for Red Bull, so they could be anywhere. But I put here what is going to keep them motivated, because they're a bit of a gap now to Mercedes. Verstappen's 3rd. Are they really motivated enough to try and help Tsunoda over the rest of 2025? Or where do we think that, are they just going to go, well, let's just think about 2026 and write this one off?
I think they've got to try and get some confidence back into Tsunoda of Red Bull, because he is not having the best time of it. I mean, he was praised for his efforts at Spa during quali, but he got the strategy wrong there, and that's why he didn't end up scoring any points. With Red Bull's season, 2 wins and a sprint win. Verstappen has been on pole 4 times as well. It's definitely no more than a 6.
No, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. 6 is what I'm going to give them, but that's the sort of leverage, really. If they hadn't picked up any wins, it would have gone down to a 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a hell of a rebuild. I want to see what they can do. I really want to see them second half just, literally grab the ball by the horns, but actually just show some fight. It sounds a bit weird. This team were winning 23 out of 24 races 2 years ago, as I mentioned, but to come out and actually show they've not rolled over, that they do want to still fight Mercedes and Ferrari. So they're on Red Bull on 194 points. I mean, fourth is guaranteed because, as I say, Williams are on 70, so that gap probably won't erode. But 236 up to Mercedes, so it's a bit of a gap, and they need not just Verstappen firing and getting podiums and getting good results. They need Tsunoda to chip in more than the 10 that he has. So then we come to Mercedes and Ferrari. So as I say, Mercedes on 236, Ferrari on 260, and again between them, Mercedes got one win, and Ferrari don't at the moment, do they at all? So one win for these two teams, and yet they're second in the championship. I mean, for both, again, you'd say this is a disappointment. But where do we assess Mercedes and Ferrari? Start with Mercedes. Sorry, I realise I'm trying to group them and then dissecting them after that. But start with Mercedes. How do we assess their year?
Mercedes, I would say it's been respectable. I think Antonelli's had a lot to learn. I mean, that drive he had in Australia was sensational. He got the sprint pole in Miami. He got his first podium at last in Canada, which was phenomenal. On a weekend where Mercedes had their best result of the year in terms of car performance, I would be tempted to give them it's just creeping into a 7, I think, for Mercedes, because they are ahead of Ferrari and Red Bull on merit. They just need to work on how can they close the gap on McLaren.
Yeah, it seemed like, and it was the same in Hungary as well. Russell is so consistent and so quick. He just appears. I don't know if everyone else has just sort of seen this. It's like there's that meme, isn't there, of Lando Norris and Piastri sort of going, "Where'd you come from?" Like suddenly next to like George Russell just keeps getting podiums and he keeps appearing. And as I said before, if Antonelli can start to get a few more points and start to learn from him and carry on, then yeah, they could do even better. They've got that one win, but it was a flash in the pan, as you say. They'll be looking for more performance, but they don't feel that far off. It's just they're quite anonymous in how consistent they are and just appearing in the right places at the end of races. But I think if you give Mercedes a 7, Ferrari in second, 260 with 260 points, I should say. I'm eager to hear what you're going to give them. What are you going to say about them?
Well, the two Ferrari drivers have had overall better seasons than Antonelli. We can say that. Hamilton sprint win from pole in China. Leclerc got the pole position in Hungary. That's the first one they've picked up all year. Leclerc finished on the podium, I think it's 5 times for Ferrari this year, to my understanding, just from memory. What do I give them? It's no more than 7. I can say that.
I was thinking I might have to knock you down on some points here, but if you've got lower than 7, then yeah, I'm agreeing with it.
It's not going to be any higher than 7, Perry. I'll tell you that now. That's just creeping inside.
This is coming from the fact that at the end of 2024, Ferrari were pushing McLaren like crazy for the Constructors' Championship. I was so hungry for that fight this year, that Constructors' brawl between McLaren and Ferrari, the two top teams in Formula One history. And instead, you've got McLaren with over double the points of Ferrari. So I think just on that alone, you cannot look at this season and go, Ferrari in second is good. They should be so much closer, but it just hasn't been the season I think that we were expecting of them. So yeah, I was prepared to, as I say, I was prepared to knock some points off. If you're going to go for an 8, I was going to go no, and knock a point or 2 off. But yeah, I think 7. You know, they've had some landmark moments, but it's not been the season that they expected. And hopefully, that development that they showed last year can come good, and they can get some more decent races under their belt in the second half of 2026 and get at least one win. So then that leaves us with McLaren, and I mean, we're really debating 9s and 10s, surely, at this point.
It's definitely at least a 9 for McLaren. I mean, the only improvement really is the fact that they failed to win in Japan, Imola, and Canada. And in terms of the sprints, they only picked up 1 sprint win out of 3. But I think it's got to be at least a 9. I'm giving McLaren a 9. I did consider a 10, but they would have needed to have accomplished virtually everything.
I'm not going to, but as a McLaren fan, I think it would be unfair for me to say it should be higher. But I mean, what I want to know from here, right? The constructors, let's say it's wrapped up, and again, as you alluded to on your social media videos, if they get 1-2 finish in the next 3 races, it will be sealed up. Now, we're not going to say that they're going to get those 1-2 finishes, but let's just say 3 races from now, the constructors is tied up. Tom, do you think that we're going to see a change in the way that McLaren go racing? Because this is a team that have always been team first, driver second. But for me, going back to Hungary, I think if I was Oscar Piastri walking back to that garage saying, look, I know Lando had to throw the dice to come from what was effectively a bad start down to 5th, back up to 4th once he'd overtaken Alonso. He had to throw the dice, but I'd be saying, look, I don't care. If I finish 2nd, I'm fine with that as long as Lando Norris is 3rd or lower. And I think that's where his mindset will shift. I think that's where the team are going to have to draw some deeper lines, I think, in the garage. Do you agree with that? Or do you think they're just going to keep going about the way they're always done?
It's going to be dangerously, not chaotic, but it's going to be mesmerizing to watch these two go into combat for the championship. And this could be the start of a dynasty of McLaren, you know, in the days of Senna and Prost when they were both fighting for the championship. McLaren didn't have too much of an issue with the constructors, but when it came to those two fighting between each other, it often ended in tears, not to mention Suzuka 89.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a little, you might look at me and think I'm old enough to remember that, but just a little bit too young to remember that. But obviously we've all watched the Senna documentary. We all know very well about the stories that happened at the end of the 80s when they were the dominant force. And that's sort of where we're looking at now. And hopefully they've learned a great deal about how to take 2 drivers towards a driver championship battle against one another. I did quite like, they already have said, look, we're going to sit down with both drivers and say, one of you is going to have the best day of your life. One of you will be champion. That's just, again, looking at the points difference, it's going to be one of those 2. The other guy is going to have the worst day of their life. They're going to fall just short because it's not going to be like a 30-point gap at the end of the season either, I don't think. So how they go about managing them mentally is going to be a big question, big fundamental point for the second half of the season. I really hope that they can maintain a good relationship between the 2 of them and fight fairly and give us a brilliant battle. It's like the 2014 to 2016 Mercedes battle for me, where as Formula One fans that we are, we almost don't want to see one team dominate like McLaren have. But if they can at least fight and give us entertainment whilst they do it, then I'm absolutely all for it. So yeah, it's going to be a good battle. Tom, who's going to be the champion?
Oh. These 2 are going to have their own dips in form, aren't they? We could end up having a situation where the driver who ends up becoming champion could be the one that wins the most races, which is at vibes of 1988 again. Do you remember best 11 results?
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, that doesn't apply to this. I think because of his late season surge potentially and learning a little bit from last year, I think Lando will just snatch it from Piastri.
Okay. So pre-season, going back even before Australia, I'm going to be very proud if this comes off. I said Oscar Piastri would be champion. Halfway through the season, and helped by the fact he's got a little bit, tiny margin of 9 points advantage going into the second half, I'm sticking to my guns. I still think it's going to be Piastri. I feel like the cool-headedness of Piastri is going to shine at some point. There will be a moment where his cool collected self is just going to gather a third or a fourth that he needs to get him some points, where a Norris might just go, no, I have to overtake now. I have to do this move if I want to be champion. And I think that is the very subtle, minute difference that we might see. But either way, I'm really looking forward to this fight. I'm so looking forward to it. I hope it goes all the way to Abu Dhabi. So we'll see. A fiver in it, shall we say? Like if it's Lando Norris, I'll send you a Monzo some money or whatever they do.
Yeah, well, we'll sort something out with that. But yeah, I'll happy to go a fiver with you, and maybe when we next meet up, I'll give you the money then. I'll buy you a drink or something.
We'll do that. Yeah, we'll meet up for an end of season drink, and yeah, more than a fiver will be spent. Tom, thank you so much for joining me and reviewing the first half of the Formula One season. Where will we hear from you next?
Whenever you want me to. I mean, my schedule isn't too stacked between now and the end of the season, so as of when you need me. I mean, the next time I'm in Biggin Hill will be during the Monza weekend, but I'll be at home for Zandvoort. I'll be doing commentary for JB Motorsports.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing you on there. Shout out to JB Motorsports, and yeah, a second shout out to the TeeShop for my new tee that I've been trying to get into view. But yeah, I've posted some things. But yeah, thank you very much for kitting me out with my own t-shirt to the TeeShop. I will link everything in this, including Cairns Catches Up, brilliant series that it was. So please go and listen to that if you haven't already. For now, Tom, thank you so much. To all of you listening at home, thank you very much for listening. And wherever I hear from you next, or see from you next, hope you have a wonderful time. See you. Goodbye.